rather than a tense exchange with a struggling tenant. What he discovered inside made him stop cold. Hidden behind rolls of dusty fabric and forgotten mannequins was a fragile little girl, no older than 8, working a sewing machine with red, blistered fingers. Her wide eyes, filled with fear, briefly met his before she flinched away like a wounded animal. Something was clearly wrong. Who was this child? Why was she working in silence amidst the suffocating heat, while the adults were nowhere to be seen? That single encounter would unravel a twisted web of lies, abuse, and stolen wealth, drawing Augustine into a battle he never anticipated. But would he be able to save her before it was too late? Or would the powerful figures hiding behind fake smiles and dark secrets silence him before the truth could surface? Stay with us, because what started as a simple visit for rent collection turned into a life-or-death rescue mission. You won't believe how the story ends. The sun shone down over the quiet town of Revelstein, nestled somewhere in southern France, where the summer heat clung to cobblestone streets and shimmered off rooftops like smoke. Austin Dequa, a sharply dressed property tycoon, adjusted his tailored cufflinks and checked the time on his antique wristwatch. His Italian loafers tapped impatiently on the dusty ground as he stood before a crumbling tailor shop tucked away in a forgotten alley of the historic district. As owner of numerous commercial buildings across Europe, Augustine rarely handled overdue rent personally, but something about this tailor shop, named Atelier Leon, stirred a strange curiosity within him. The place had ignored every eviction notice, every warning, more than defiance. It was silence, and Augustine hated silence more than bad investments. He unlocked the shop with an old master key, unsure how it even ended up in his collection, and the wooden door creaked open, accompanied by a bell's jingle announcing his entry into the dim, dusty interior. No one greeted him. The shop was frozen in time, threadbare curtains over cracked windows, mannequins dressed in outfits that hadn't been fashionable in decades, and dust floating like ghosts in narrow beams of light. Then, from the back of the shop, came a soft rhythmic sound, a sewing machine. Augustine stepped cautiously past rows of shelves, bolts of old fabric, and mannequins draped in moth-eaten gowns. And then he saw her, a little girl, no more than 8, her frail body hunched over the sewing machine like a shadow. Her tiny hands moved cloth beneath the needle with mechanical precision. Her dress was too large, stained, hanging off her bony shoulders. Her fingers bore small cuts, some still fresh. She didn't even glance at him. "Hello there," Augustine said softly, careful in his tone. The girl jumped. The spool of thread fell and rolled to his feet. She froze, eyes wide like a startled animal, expecting punishment. Her fear hit Augustine like a punch to the chest. He crouched down, palms open. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. What's your name?" "Emily," she whispered, still staring at the fallen spool. "Well, Emily," he said gently. "Are you here all alone?" She shook her head. "My aunt. She'll be back soon. I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." Augustine nodded, noticing the exhaustion in her eyes. "Shouldn't you be at school or outside playing with friends?" Her silence answered more than words ever could. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed open. A middle-aged woman appeared, grocery bags in hand, her eyes narrowing at the scene. "Who are you?" she snapped, quickly stepping between Augustine and the girl. "I'm Augustine Dequa," he said firmly, rising to his feet. "I own this building. I came about the rent. But now I'm more concerned about why this child is working instead of learning." The woman smiled coldly. "Emily isn't working. She just likes to play with the sewing machine. She's my niece. Her mother passed away 2 years ago. I'm all she has." Augustine studied Emily's hands again. "Then why are her fingers bleeding?" he asked. "She's clumsy," the woman snapped. "Besides, she wasn't feeling well this morning. Had a fever. That's why she's not in school." "Is that right?" Emily? The girl nodded faintly, avoiding all eye contact. Something didn't add up. The woman, who introduced herself as Celine Merrill, offered Augustine bitter coffee and tried to steer the conversation back to the overdue rent, but his mind was elsewhere. That feeling gnawed at him. Later that afternoon, back in his office overlooking the Rhone River, Augustine couldn't focus. Emily's hunched figure haunted him. He called his assistant. "I want a full background check on Celine Merrill and Emily. Something isn't right." 3 hours later, the results were worse than he'd feared. The tailor shop was drowning in debt. Yet for years, creditors had mysteriously left Celine alone. No official custody papers, no school enrollment, no medical visits. On paper, Emily barely existed. Augustine leaned back in his chair, rage rising like a tide. How can no one see this? A child enslaved behind a shop window, and the world turned a blind eye. His friend and lawyer, Damon Volan, shook his head. "Augustine, you've never cared about these tenants before. You own over 60 buildings. Why now? Why her?" "I don't know," Augustine whispered. "Maybe because this time I looked her in the eyes." The next morning, Augustine sat across the street from the tailor shop, watching Celine from a cafe window. She greeted clients with the charm of a serpent. Emily returned to her silent sewing, as if her life depended on each stitch. Augustine clenched his jaw. He couldn't walk away, not this time. "Now, tell me, what would you do if you found a child in this situation? Do you think Augustine should get involved or stay out of it? If this story is tugging at your heartstrings, comment below to show your support and love for Emily's journey." The following evening, Augustine sat in his study under the dim light, poring over a manila folder filled with documents his assistant had gathered. The deeper he read, the more disturbing the picture became. Emily had no official guardian, no school records, no medical history since her mother's tragic accident. She was invisible and vulnerable in the eyes of the law. How was this even possible? He muttered, running a hand through his neatly combed hair, now disheveled from stress. Damien, his lawyer, leaned against the fireplace. "Celine has been using Emily. That much is clear. And if these bank statements are correct, she's not just exploiting her for labor. She's draining the inheritance left by Emily's mother." Slowly, carefully, just enough to avoid detection, Augustine's fists clenched. "And the authorities? Corruption likely. The local child welfare office hasn't responded to complaints in years. Some of Celine's debts were forgiven by anonymous donors. She has connections somewhere. We need solid evidence before we go to court, or they'll shut us down before we even begin." Outside, the fire crackled. Rain tapped softly against the windows. "I want to speak with someone who's seen it firsthand, someone who's worked for her, who knows what Emily endures behind closed doors." The next day, Damon arranged a quiet meeting in a nearby cafe with Leah Fournier, who'd worked briefly as a seamstress for Celine. Nervously, Leah looked around as she settled in, her hands trembling slightly. "She's careful. You know," Leah whispered, always pretending to be caring in public. "But behind that facade, she's a tyrant. I've seen her force Emily to work long hours. No rest, no breaks. If Emily made a mistake or even looked at her the wrong way, she'd get slapped or locked in the storage room. One time, I found her sleeping under a table, trembling, with bruises on her arms." Augustine's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you report it?" Leah's eyes welled with tears. "I did, but the authorities never followed up. And then, one night, 2 men came to my apartment. They said if I spoke again, something bad might happen to my daughter. I quit the next morning." She pulled out a worn envelope from her purse and slid it across the table. Inside were blurry photos. Emily sewing late at night, her fingers bandaged, her face pale and sunken. There were also scanned copies of letters Leah had written to authorities, Ignored. Unanswered. Augustine nodded slowly. Thank you. Leia, you've done more than enough. I promise. This ends now. That evening, Augustine returned unannounced to the shop. The bell jingled again. But this time, he didn't wait for an invitation. Celine looked up. Startled. Muir Dequa. She snapped. He cut her off, placing a thick folder on the counter. This isn't about rent anymore. We need to discuss Emily's legal status. I know you have no custody rights. And I know you've been accessing funds that don't belong to you. And I know the girl is being exploited. Celine's face darkened like a thunderstorm. You have no right. She hissed. I have every right. Augustine shot back. I reported you to the district judge and the Regional Child Protection Agency. They're opening an investigation as we speak. Emily peeked from behind a curtain in the back room, her eyes wide, hands trembling. Why do you care? Celine hissed. She's just a burden. Her mother was a dreamer who left nothing but debt and pity behind. I gave that girl a roof. Augustine stepped closer. You gave her chains, and now I'm here to break them. Celine's voice turned venomous. You think you're some sort of savior? A rich man playing hero? You don't know who you're dealing with. I have friends in high places. You're making enemies you won't see coming. He didn't flinch. Then let them come, he said, turning toward Emily. She didn't move until he knelt in front of her. I'm going to get you out of here, he said softly. You don't have to be afraid anymore. She looked at him, lips trembling. Will she hurt you? She whispered. No, he assured her. I won't let her. As he turned to leave, Augustine felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Celine wasn't finished. She would fight back. He saw that in her eyes. Fear wasn't there. It was calculation. He just didn't know how far she was willing to go. Later that night, Augustine's black sedan moved silently down a quiet rural road, headed back to his estate outside Revelstein. At first, he didn't notice the dark vehicle behind him. It had no lights, no plates. Then, it surged forward. Augustine's pulse quickened. He gripped the wheel tighter, checking his mirrors. The car behind mirrored every turn and lane change. When he took a sharp left onto a smaller road, it followed. Suddenly, it sped up, veering aggressively toward him, trying to force him off the road. What the? He slammed the brakes, spinning into a side ditch, narrowly avoiding a tree. His car stalled, smoke hissing from under the hood. The other vehicle stopped a few meters away. A man stepped out, stocky, hooded, a scar running down his cheek. He tapped on Augustine's window slowly, once. Twice, Augustine rolled it down a crack. The man leaned in. Stay away from the girl, or next time, you won't walk away. Then he turned, got into his car, and vanished into the night. Augustine sat frozen, heart pounding. For the first time in years, fear crept beneath his skin. But beneath that fear burned rage. They weren't just hiding abuse. They were protecting it through violence. Augustine Dequa had just declared war. What would you do if someone tried to scare you from doing what's right? Would you back off or fight harder? If Augustine's courage inspires you, comment justice below. Do you believe Emily will be saved before it's too late? Share your thoughts with us. 3 sleepless nights had passed since that ambush. Augustine sat in his dimly lit office, shadows dancing on the walls as a storm rolled into Revelstein. The police report was vague, an unidentified vehicle. No license plate. No street cameras in the area. The message was clear. Someone with powerful connections was pulling the strings. Still, Augustine refused to back down. Damien's voice crackled through the phone. We secured a court date for an emergency custody hearing. You'll need to testify. But I've also learned something worse. Augustine interrupted. Worse than attempted murder? Damien hesitated. Celine bought 2 plane tickets to a country with no child protection treaty. Departures in 2 days. She's planning to flee with Emily. Augustine shot to his feet, heart pounding. Then we stop her now. He made one call to his private security team, another to Judge Meline Pan, known for standing against corruption. Within hours, a protective order was issued. Celine was officially barred from traveling with Emily or removing her from the region. Yet time was running out. The next day, Augustine stood near the departure gates at Montale train station, hidden behind a stand. He watched, then saw her, Celine, dragging Emily by the arm, pushing through the terminal. The girl's small frame resisted with every step, tears streaking her cheeks. Without hesitation, Augustine stepped into the light. "Celine," he called out. She froze. People turned. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "I'm here to stop you," Augustine said calmly. "Put her down. You're violating a court order." Celine's face twisted into a mask of fake distress. "This man is harassing me. She's not her father." Two police officers stepped forward, badges gleaming. "Celine Duran." One announced, "You're under investigation for abuse and illegal use of a minor's inheritance. Please step away from the child." "No," she screamed. "She's mine. You can't take her from me. She's not yours." Augustine growled. "You stole her life, but not anymore." Emily broke free and ran into his arms. The officers restrained Celine, who clawed and kicked until they finally cuffed her wrists. She yelled profanities that echoed across the platform. But Emily, wrapped in Augustine's coat, heard nothing. For the first time in years, she closed her eyes and felt safe. The courtroom in Montreal fell silent as Judge Pan read the final verdict. The investigation uncovered years of embezzlement and child labor violations, clear evidence from Leah Fournier's testimony, medical reports, and photos. Celine had no defense and was sentenced to 8 years in prison, barred from future custody or guardianship rights, ordered to return all funds taken from Emily's trust. When the judge addressed Emily, her tone softened. "Miss Emily Rousseau, due to the extraordinary care shown by Mr. Augustine Dequa and upon the recommendation of your psychologist and child services, the court grants him permanent custody with the right to adopt upon request." The courtroom erupted in quiet applause. Emily sat beside Augustine, clutching his hand tightly. She turned to him and whispered, "Can I call you Papa now?" Augustine's throat tightened. He nodded. Yes, you can." A year later, sunlight spilled into a cozy breakfast room overlooking the Lyre Valley. Emily, now healthy and full of life, was painting a picture of a house with a big tree and a bearded man, her new father. Augustine brought over fresh croissants and kissed her on the head. "That's beautiful," he said. "It's us," she replied proudly. "Where's the sewing machine?" he teased gently. She grinned. Gone forever. Instead of trauma, her days now brimmed with books, art, school, and warm dinners. She had friends, laughter, and most importantly, freedom. Augustine still kept the first drawing she ever gave him, a simple heart with the words mercy. "See Papa." It reminded him why he had risked everything, to do what was right, to save just one life, and to become someone's home. What are your thoughts on Amel's journey? Did this story move you? If you believe in protecting children at all costs, comment support below to show your support and love. What would you have done if you were in Augustine's place? Share your thoughts in the comments.